You're welcome to the Economy and Politics Show, where we discuss key political economic developments as they affect the household. We're in the last week of May 2022, and it is the peak of primaries as political parties will be electing their candidates for the various elected positions ahead of the 2023 general elections. This edition, we will discuss Nigeria and the quest for a stable polity. And my guest is a well-respected Nigerian political economist, Professor Pat Utomi, who is joining us virtually. Nice to have you, Prof, and it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be able to join you.
Thank you. So, our viewers, before we begin, let us give you a recap of key political economic stories from last week. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's inflation rate for April 2022 rose to 16.82%, while food inflation continued on its high trajectory as it also rose to 8.32%. Also last week, the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, at the end of its recent national dialogue, which discussed critical challenges confronting Nigeria's economy, highlighted 6 pragmatic steps for achieving a new Nigeria for inclusive growth. They include rethinking what socioeconomic development outcome means for an average Nigerian, rethinking the role of market and the private sector, deepening sectoral reforms to support broad-based growth and competitiveness, adopting integrated national and sub-national approach to economic inclusion and development, achieving a pragmatic and actionable social sector reforms, and developing workable and inclusive national security strategy. And that's that for last week, key political economic stories. And let's get on to the conversation. If you're joining us, it's the Economy and Politics Show, and today we're looking at Nigeria and the quest for a stable polity. My guest is a well-respected political economist, Professor Pat Utomi, who joins us virtually. So, Prof, let's begin with the concerns around the 2022 elections. While we're preparing for it, some eminent personalities like Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Robert Clark, and even Chief Afe Babalala, also an SAN, they've been calling for an interim national government when this administration's tenure elapses. They believe that that will help to address issues around insecurity and look at a government of national unity to help stabilize the policies. I want to ask, are these calls valid at this time? Because we are looking at a democracy that has passed over 5 dispensations since 1999, and we're looking at an election cycle here. On the other side, there are calls for interim national government.
Well, obviously there are challenges. In many ways, we've been living the lie. This really isn't a democracy. We have to be honest with ourselves. But because we're pretending that it is, at least some things that could have been worse are not as bad as they should have been. So in that sense, maybe it's a little better to continue to live that small lie that it's really a democracy. The truth of the matter is that the system is severely manipulated all the time. And so the legitimacy of the government is low. This is why voters are not turning out as they should turn out to vote. And this has hurt the system. I can not burrow into the heads of the various people who have called for interim national government. Their motives can be different. But I think that there's a general concern that just going to another election and electing some people who have no clue about the real problems facing Nigeria, but just like the glamour of power or the abuse that they can make of it, can only accelerate Nigeria's winding up as a going concern. I think that if we don't do some dramatic things between now and our next election, whenever they may be, I think you can just estimate when Nigeria will expire as a functioning country. Because the frustrations of Nigerian people are seen in the state of anomie around the country, the violence everywhere. And it didn't take too long to get to where Somalia is today. And it can happen here. Let's not pretend or deceive ourselves. So thoughtful people are saying, look, perhaps we should pause and ask ourselves, where are we going on this journey? How can we ensure that it works? A starting point would be justice to all, a sense of right and wrong in how things are done, and a clear national strategy for where we're going. much of which seems to be not available today.
Well, Prof, you talk about national strategy, but let's look at the current electoral process. The Electoral Act 2022, is it sufficient to guarantee a credible 2023 election? Are these still areas to improve on? I know that you've had this group, you've been discussing possibilities of that strong third force also. You want to shed some light on what has been happening too. This week, the primaries are already full gear across the political parties, the 18 of them. And the Independent National Electoral Commission has said they're not going to exceed that timeline.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on these timelines that have been set up by INEC, but you can run into the timelines, run full blast to fulfill all righteousness and end up without a country. So yeah, you know, sometimes a chicken and egg situation, or sometimes it is how do we face this kind of scenario. But the bottom line is that we have been trying to get to do both. We called the stakeholder conference on the future of Nigeria in Abuja about a week ago. Had interestingly deep participation. We are also trying to build up the alternative platform, which is typically called a third force. In this effort, we have brought together a number of social movements, including the labor movement, both NLC and TUC, and have brought several political parties to agree to be collaborating partners at two levels. One is at the level of fusion. You probably have heard that the NC front has gone through or is going through a fusion process with the Labour Party, which is also backed by the Nigeria Labour Congress and the TUC.
That's a good one, Prof. But I'm looking now at the fact that with the various challenges in the country, the economic stagnation, the agitations across the country, and the pervading level of insecurity, the big question is what are the options for a stabilized polity with the reality that, like you rightly said, we are gradually disintegrating as a nation. We don't want to become a Somalia case. But what are those options at this point? Your friend and colleague, Professor Sitagbu, economist, ESG event last week said, if we don't fix politics, we can't even fix the economy.
Very true. I think that we have to come from different perspectives. There are those who say that it's time to begin again, clean, fresh slate, reject everybody who has been in significant operating levels in the politics of 1999 till today, because to try the old wine or old skin would be terrible for Nigeria's future. There are those who say, wait a minute, you can absorb them, but let fresh faces provide the direction that we see in Nigeria. Usman Bugeje and RMP, which I'm also a steering member of, a committee member of, has focused on leadership selection criteria. How does a person qualify to run for House of Reps, or to run for governor, or to run for president? Hitherto, it was an all-comers affair, but we want to ensure that we determine that. And so this is the context in which one should see all the organizing rather than agonizing that has been going on. The organizing will enable us bring to the fore leadership group that can offer fresh ideas, that is committed to sacrificial service for advancing the common good. Those who have become used to parties, political parties as a place of spoils, where you go and get your share of national cake, this prebendal culture. Those people could be difficult to reform and may need to be put aside for a fresh breed, for a group, a fresh air and new light to show Nigeria where it could be going.
So, Prof, in your final words in the next 30 seconds, what would you be saying to the political class and the elite this period where there's a need for a consensus to move the nation forward? Your friend Nasser Rufai, the governor of Kaduna State, raised concerns last week about insecurity in Kaduna State. If it's not addressed, we may not even have an election in various parts of the state, which may even invalidate the whole electoral process when you look at what's happening in Southeast.
Yeah, Southeast doesn't look good for elections either. So if Kaduna State, Zamfara State, Borno State, Southeast, all of these places are not looking good for elections, what's the point of the election? In some ways, I align with Chief Afeba Lola and co in looking for an alternative holding pattern, but not, some people fear that because they think it's an excuse for the Buharis of this world to continue. No, they must not continue. I personally would say if each of the major, for this purpose, let's just take the major ethnic nationality groups, give us 5 people of certain criteria, we must all agree. Bring them out, must be competent, visionary people who haven't soiled their fingers in anything and so on and so forth. 5 from each. So you 15 man, form for us an interim government, elect from amongst yourselves a chair, rotate it every couple of weeks or months for the next 2 years, give us a new constitution, and let our country move forward. I think that kind of thing can work.
Okay. So indeed, there's need for reform of our constitution, and like you rightly said, we may need to vote for reform. That's the popular maxim now across the country. Credited to you.
Referendum may be more valuable than election.
Okay, I mean,
because there are people who have actually reached a stage where they're saying, "Look, the Nigeria project is over." I hear it so frequently now. I'm so worried.
Yeah.
I talk to them and say, "What are you? Is there still in Nigeria? Nigeria project is over. Let's find a peaceful way of just ensuring that everybody goes their way." But there is a greater benefit to Nigeria, and I think we need to convince each other how to arrive at that.
So, Prof, in closing, if I'm to get you right, we need to renegotiate our national unity.
Absolutely. The modus vivendi needs to be reconfigured. We need to renegotiate it.
Thank you very much, Professor Pat Utomi. I would say an elder statesman, one who has been there right from the 80s at a very young age, advising the government then of late Alhaji Shehu Shagari. And now you've evolved in many decades in political economy analysis as a scholar and, of course, actively involved in rescuing Nigeria and pushing for a stable polity. We hope that in this period of the primaries and all the processes, we can have a system that gives Nigerians hope and push the nation forward. But thank you once again, Prof, for this time. And that'll be all for this edition of the Economy and Politics Show. If you have suggestions, comments, and questions on the topic we discussed today, please send your questions, comments, or views to Ottoabasi Abasiekong at proshare.co. You can also subscribe on our website, proshare.co, to get all the latest stories and developments happening in the economy and, of course, the political system as we gear up, build-up happens. This week is a busy one. A lot of primaries coming out across political parties, so we're monitoring that to give you across our social media platforms, which is displayed on the screen. Thank you for being part of this show, and don't forget to get your permanent voters card as the time is ticking. Have a nice day.